CAC or LTV?
If you're looking at CAC, you're just looking for the most efficient place to advertise. If you're looking at LTV, you're actually looking at the value of it is. So if you're looking at like a channel CAC versus a channel LTV, ultimately that channel LTV is going to kind of better position you to spend your dollars effectively.
What's your favorite marketing acronym?
Oh, wow. Definitely not MMM. Probably ROI, because I think ultimately you should be making more money than you spend.
Welcome to Growth Talks, where we dive deep into the world of growth and marketing with industry leaders. I'm Krystina Rubino. I'm the general manager of Offline at Right Side Up. Today, I am thrilled to speak with Chelsea Cramer, who's the marketing analytics lead at Credit Karma. She is a marketing analytics expert who has helped so many companies answer the question around how to use their dollars more effectively. She has spent the past decade in a mix of internal and agency roles, developing her expertise in startups and established brands across all of the industries. And in this episode, we are going to get into it. We are going to get into all things marketing analytics and measurements. So without further ado, Chelsea, thank you so much for joining me. I am so stoked to talk and nerd out about data with you for the next however long until we get kicked off of this recording, but I'm stoked. Thank you again.
Amazing. Yeah, excited to be here and talk about my love of data with you. So I'm ready for all your questions.
Sweet. Well, I mean, we'll get into it. You've been doing this for a minute. And I think whenever you're in an industry that's as ever-changing and ever-evolving as technology, as marketing, as analytics, measurement, MTA, et cetera, how have you evolved your approach over the years? Like, there's probably so many things that if you take a second and pause, you realize are like different from when you first started, like the arrival of new tools, like data privacy is a concern that is more openly talked about now than it ever has been before. The general muddiness in the attribution schema landscape. How have you kind of changed and evolved with it?
Yeah, so I think, it's changed a lot. Like how we measure has changed a lot. What we measure has changed a lot. But I think if we think about marketing as a whole, we have changed so much over that period of time. 10 to 15 years ago, what were the channels people were using digitally? It was email, Google, maybe a little Facebook, maybe a couple other small channels, but we really didn't have that many channels. Now, fast forward to today, and what's awesome is that marketing's grown exponentially. There are so many places we can market it now. There's podcasts like we're doing now, there's video, there's influencers, there's social, a million different places where you can spend a lot of dollars. And with that, you need to figure out how you're actually measuring those dollars that you're spending across all these different channels. So, now rather than focusing on click-based attribution, I'm much more concerned about what the actual incremental impact is of advertising on all these different channels. So in order to do so, I'm doing things like incrementality testing, maybe looking at more model-based approaches like a media mix model, still looking at some click-based attribution, but rather than it being the be-all end-all that it was, 5 to 10 years ago, now it's, in order to effectively measure your marketing, you need to do a mix of a couple of different things to actually answer the questions you're hoping to answer.
We've talked a little bit about like how your approach to analytics has evolved and just kind of like the changes that have happened in the industry over time. And I'm curious, with everything that's going to happen this year, when it comes to the privacy sandbox that Google is creating, when it comes to the deprecation of third-party cookies, when it comes to, nobody has a crystal ball. If we did, you and I would be off starting a new company somewhere, and then we would be on an island somewhere, right? It'd be amazing. But since we don't, and there's challenges and changes that might even further muddy these murky attribution waters that we swim around in, where do you think we're going to be at by the end of the year?
That's a great question. The way I'm trying to safeguard against all these tracking changes is to have as many data points to triangulate against in terms of measurement now, while we still have some of that tracking, or times when we don't. And, figuring out like the different methodologies, trying to use as many as possible, doing incrementality tests, building out your media mix model so you have a lot of confidence in it, doing that as like ramping up some of these data clean room type tools like Data Hub. So you can try to get an understanding of your performance and how it relates to any existing tracking that you're doing, so that when the existing tracking potentially goes away, at least you have some data points that says we spent X, so we expected to get about Y from it, even though we don't have as much clarity in terms of looking at those data points now.
That's such a good call. I'm a big advocate for like overlapping and redundant methodologies. Somebody I've talked with for growth talks and just have talked to about this in general is like everything's kind of wrong and also kind of right. So it's just about triangulating what is the least wrong and what is the most right and bumping them up against each other. And I love the idea of making a concerted effort to plan for this by doing more of that now, as opposed to getting caught flat-footed at the end of Q3 or, the beginning of Q4 when you're heading right into 2025 planning, which is something I didn't think I said out loud, or I can't believe I said out loud. But yeah, I really like the notion of that strategy to adapt. And like, to that point, it's so fascinating. Data as a discipline, we want to think that it's completely like almost like dehumanized, right? That it's just like, well, these are the data, this is the fact, and these are the facts. But there's still subjectivity and analysis when it comes to the story that the data is telling. So like, and I know you're amazing at helping uncover the story that the data is trying to tell. So like, have there been any times where you're completely surprised or like have had a perspective or something change and reset based on the story that your data is like trying to tell you that you uncover when you're like kind of going through?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm surprised fairly frequently. I think we all make assumptions, and that goes back to your question about intuition versus data driven. I think I've been wrong enough times with my assumptions that I've learned that the data's right, or maybe there are cases where the data's weird and the data's wrong. But I think one example I can give is a former company that I worked with that worked on basically giving people access to multiple gyms or fitness studios with their membership, right? With a product like that, you assume that people are going to go to multiple gyms over the course of the month and be using the product because of the main benefit, which is you get access to all of these things. When you look at the data, it was a very high percentage of people that were only going to one gym a month. So rather than use the product, and we looked over multiple periods of time to see, are people maybe they're just going to one place because that's what they're in the mood for. They're in the mood for Pilates this week. It's having a moment, versus the next month they're, exclusively going to Barry's or whatever it is. Because of that, we started to think a little bit differently about how we're actually messaging to people, because, to date, most of the messaging had been around, you can access all these amazing gyms for one price, when realistically people wanted to go to a single gym, but maybe they didn't want to pay as much because they got a discount through using our product. So it was kind of changing that a little bit in terms of how we were actually messaging to people to kind of meet them where they were at, since people weren't using the product the way we expected them to.
It's incredible what you can learn by just listening and also taking a read over multiple periods of time, because I would imagine you see false negatives, false positives, inconclusive results. Like, how do you think about weeding those out, and how do you not? It's so easy to look at results like that and not pressure test them and kind of like take them forward and start making decisions based on one set of data. That's such an intentional approach. How do you facilitate that?
Yeah, so I think it's depended on the company or the client that I'm working on, because I would say most have certain attributes of customers that you'll want to pressure test through. Maybe you'll look at the results through the lens of age band, see if kind of 18 to 24s, if the results are the same, pre to post test or whatever it is that you're looking at. You also might look at, if you're looking at a membership or a subscription, the subscription tier that people are signed up in. You might do that same analysis through the lens of geo or country, just to get a sense of, are these results that I'm seeing real results, and do they hold against kind of all these different attributes, which I think a lot of those attributes just depends on, having an expertise in your actual business and having that context over, what things could maybe be impacting whatever results you're seeing, and working with your stakeholders. If you're new to a client or new to a company, working with them to get a better understanding of all the cuts you should be looking at ultimately to kind of validate and verify your results.
It goes back again to, as many data points as you can have are great to have. It can get kind of overwhelming. That's like the other end of it. So it's like, how do you decide sometimes when to tune? I guess asked a slightly different way, but a slightly different question. How do you decide sometimes when to tune certain things out? Like, when do you, obviously favoring a data-driven over an intuition-based approach, but what kind of makes the hair on the back of your neck go, nah? Like, when do you decide to say, like, you know what? I understand what the data is telling us here, but we've triangulated this data a couple of different ways, and it's interesting, but it's not ultimately meaningful or impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what we think the impact is. I think if you're looking at marketing data for one of your smallest channels and it looks a little weird, is that really worth me or my team spending hours and maybe days, like digging down a hole just to find out why that's happening? Maybe not. Versus if it's our biggest channel and we have no idea what's going on, we think maybe there's an error somewhere. Like, that's happened before where the data didn't make sense. Turns out there's an error with some data pipeline that's going on. And if we don't get that fixed right now, we are going to lose data for multiple days. And that is a nightmare, because then you have to call that out in the chart for the next year for why, attribution to a specific channel dropped over a week of time or whatever it is. So, through all of that, and I think if you spend the time kind of going down kind of all those different rabbit holes to really verify your results in the past over time, then people believe you when you say, this makes sense for us to look into further, or maybe this doesn't make as much sense for us to look into. So part of it is, gaining trust with your stakeholders or your clients over time, so that when you can make those calls in the future, they believe you.
You've worked at so many different companies, and you've worked on so many different projects, and you worked on launches, and you worked on redesigns, and you worked on all of those things. And like, what are some horror stories when it comes to how companies have tackled analytics? When did you log into somebody's Google Analytics account and like grasped your heart and were like, what just happened here?
Yeah, I mean, anything where it's clear that there's duplication kills me. Like, I might be looking at somebody's Shopify account that tells me how many sales they got yesterday, and I'm looking at their Google Analytics account and it's showing me 10 times that number. And I'm like, oh God, we got to dig into this. Yeah, because those are tough, because, my expertise isn't as much in setting up Google Analytics. So in those cases, I can't necessarily say what's happening or why it's happening. I can say, this is not right, but like, I can't fix it. Sorry. So things like that are always tough. Also, like, on the flip side, anytime I've talked to someone who's very convicted that a certain marketing channel works, and I'm like, you're crazy. I think there was a fairly well-known men's clothing subscription box, whatever you want to call it, back in like 2012. Their CEO was convinced that the like Sky Miles mag on airlines was where they should be advertising. And I think it was the kind of thing where the same day that their ad was published on planes happened to be a day sales went up. And it was also, funnily enough, it was like the early day of podcasts as well. It was also a day where we had gotten them a placement on a podcast. So like things like that, where, yeah, there's a lot of noise, but definitely a nightmare in terms of like, I know you're wrong, but I can't prove it. So definitely things like that are always frustrating.
Yeah. It's also like, that's the part that, like, to the point about getting buy-in from stakeholders, and also just when there's a lot of stakeholders, or even just, I like to say, like a lot of hands in the cookie jar. Like if you ever look at an analytics implementation, you're like, oh, this has gotten transitioned through a lot of different people, and a lot of different people have put their spin on what we want to call UTM parameters. So are there times where, like, what are some of the, like, to avoid those overlapping signals, besides, I would imagine, trying to sequence some of your marketing testing and not, I mean, maybe this is just a weird idea, but like maybe don't 4x your budget on linear TV the same day that you're launching a new channel. I know that sounds crazy, but are there like things like that that you're just like, God, as like a best practice, if I could wave a magic wand, that's a stupid old question, but like if I could just wave a magic wand and like make things easier for everybody, what, like, how would you do it?
I mean, I think it comes down to just better documentation. You know, if you're keeping track of, and it doesn't need to be something crazy complex, but if you have a Google Doc with kind of marketing tests you've run over time, what channels you're generally running over what time periods, things like that, maybe any changes you've made to tracking or measurement over a period of time. Like, it sounds so simple, but I would argue like 90% of companies don't have anything close to that. So that way, when you go into the data, you might look at a chart and you're like, oh, it looks like something happened there. Maybe the UTMs are set up correctly, maybe they're not. But if I can look and see, oh, we conveniently had a test that launched a few days before that, it looks like it's probably that. So definitely documentation, I'm like a huge proponent of, both from a kind of like what we're doing, but also how we're doing it.
So we have a little game that we play called the A/B test. And it's kind of like we were just talking about, where a lot of the variables in marketing have changed over time. We're always doing some sort of multivariate testing. We're always looking at all sorts of different, you know, is A better than B? Is C better than B? Which one is the winner, etc. So in that vein, I've got a bunch of questions to ask you. You have to pick a variable because we know that there's always a winner. But a little bit of work related, a little bit of funsies. CAC or LTV?
LTV. Wait, if you're looking at CAC, you're just looking for the most efficient place to measure or to advertise. If you're looking at LTV, you're actually looking at the value of it is. So if you're looking at like a channel CAC versus a channel LTV, ultimately that channel LTV is going to kind of better position you to spend your dollars effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's so funny because I have to like try and not inject my own opinions or be like, that's right. So I'm gonna go on to the next question because I'm like, I agree with you. Tableau or Looker?
Tableau. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Looker's pretty standard if you're using the Google suite. Ultimately, I like Tableau from a usability standpoint more, and I think it's easier to customize. And honestly, selfishly, I know the tool better, which makes it easier to use for me.
I thought, morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
I don't know why I got that vibe from you. I'm like, this, she gets up and gets at it. Like, I love that. Comedy or drama?
I don't know, like a mix of both. There's no winner in this A/B test. Yeah. I mean, like Succession.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very, very fair. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. We've got to do some more multivariate testing on that one. Automation or personalization?
Personalization.
Paid or organic?
I think it depends where the organization is putting their focus.
If you got to choose where an organization should put their focus?
Organic.
Digital photos or film?
Film.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I want that so much. Will I still reach for my iPhone when my dog does something cute? Yeah, 100%. Mac or PC?
I'm on Mac. I've gone between the two though. I feel like over the last 5 years, which is it's annoying to relearn all the shortcuts, but you have to. Yeah.
You're just like Apple C, Control C. Ah! I totally get it.
Yeah.
Data driven or intuition based?
No, data driven.
But
like,
duh.
Of course.
I know, but come on, I still had to ask. Okay. Dogs or cats?
Dogs. I have a dog. So like, of course.
What kind of a dog?
She's an Aussie mix, but she has a cat name. Her name's Mittens because we thought that would be funny.
That's adorable. My sister had a cat named Mittens. I love that so much. Oh, give Mittens a pat for me. She sounds like a very good girl. Oh, supervillain or superhero?
Yeah, I love a villain in media. You know, I feel like those are the characters with a little more depth, especially when they explain why they're the villain.
Now I'm like, what's your favorite marketing acronym?
Oh, wow. Definitely not. Probably ROI. Because I think ultimately you should be making more money than you spend. Like that's pretty basic, like running a business. I also think like I feel like I've spent a lot of time with startups and a lot of time with companies who are very strapped for cash. And in those cases, like you're not spending all the money on the brand campaigns that might not be driving results immediately. So at least with something with ROI, like it's very focused on delivering a result, which is what I like better.
Oh yeah. We love a scoreboard, right? We didn't get into this because we're not competitive people, right? Like this is who doesn't love putting $1 in and getting 3 out. Like that's, I love that you took it back to that goal because it's so easy sometimes when you're looking at KPIs and OKRs and again, the freaking acronyms, but like we love a KPI in this marketing house, right? But you know, to your point about like, I hate it. It is incredible to me how we kind of talked a little bit about this, but we used to rely so heavily on click-based attribution. And I mean, I still have like clients and prospects and people that I talk to that I'm just like, oh, we're still just doing last touch over there. So, I mean, when it comes to marketing attribution, it's like the better evil. Like, I just think nothing's right completely, right? So it's like, okay, how can we be the least wrong and the most right again? But like, how have you started or let's just say, let me actually like, you're going to start fresh with a new company. They have some existing modeling, but you are the new head of marketing analytics there. You are responsible for figuring out their schema, approach, attribution moving forward. How are you tackling it? Like what guides your approach, but like how are you tackling it?
I think first understanding what they're using today and the confidence they have in their tools. I think the role of analytics has shifted a lot from explaining what's happened to what's happened and why do we or don't we have confidence in that, which, you know, like you were saying with like a lot of these tools, they're useful, but sometimes they're wrong. So it's kind of building out trust, one, understanding what they're doing today, which maybe it's a model. If there is a model, how do we validate that model? How do we start? Maybe it's building a test calendar to, work on validating our highest spend channels first to make sure that they're actually driving the results that we think they're driving. Things like that to kind of determine if we need to start from square one or maybe what we have is working. I think sometimes brands can get a little overwhelmed with, oh, we need to have all of these fancy things, right? Because they heard somebody talking about it on a podcast or whatever it is. And like the truth is, most brands probably don't. Maybe the smaller brands can rely on something like just like Meta's ad manager or Google's ad manager. And that's enough for them because maybe they're not spending, millions and millions of dollars across TV and billboards and whatever else. So I think it's important that you don't get like caught up in overcomplicating something that doesn't need to be totally overcomplicated.
Yeah, it's almost like just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's a, the interesting, to your point, when like single source, if Facebook or Meta, I can't call it Meta. If Facebook or just can't, if Google and Facebook represent a vast majority of your ad spend, there is probably, and you're like, let's just say D2C e-commerce, right? Like there is probably a very tight data story that can be told between Shopify data, Google data, and Facebook. That is a situation in which you could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on an MTA solution that's like super fancy, but you'd probably be better served investing that money in paid media, in content production, in the things that are actually going to drive the whole machine forward, than spending it on trying to understand your not very diversified spend better. The other part of it is like, but let's just say you're starting to see diminishing returns on Meta, on Google. You're starting to understand, like, I actually need to grow the brand more aggressively. What's the point at which, like, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, I have been using click-based attribution because it's what I have. And for the channels that I have, the combination of click-based, and not everybody realizes that Facebook includes view through attribution with the pixel as just part of the measurement. I think we've all gotten so used to just like logging into Facebook and being like, oh, this is my performance. And part of the challenge over time now with data deprecation from these platforms is like, it's less accurate than it used to be modeled out. And so results look depressed. But like, let's just say that I have realized that I need to start diversifying and I need to start kind of plussing up my approach to analytics. What's a tool or and it doesn't have to be like a specific platform, but like what's a good first step for people to take to say, hey, my marketing mix is getting complex enough. I do need to do like measurement 2.0. I do need to get a little bit more complex because I've got more variables to measure. Like what's a right next step that they can like look into and start to enable in their approach, besides working with somebody like you to figure it out, which like that is the right answer, guys, is to hire Chelsea or somebody like her. But if somebody is just like, I want to understand more and I want to take a first step, what could that be for them?
I feel like it's running some version of an incrementality test, whether that might mean you go dark on a channel for a day, whatever your threshold is, and let's see how much conversions fall off on that day. Because like, as we've seen in the last year with like the beginning of the deprecation of the third-party cookie, and also Apple has started to strip away link tracking. So maybe you're seeing your attributed conversions go down because they're just not tracked anymore. So doing something like that can like attempt to give you an idea of what the actual impact is of these channels versus what the reported impact is. And obviously these are things that require, some resources, but there's also, I would feel like there's the super sophisticated data way to do things to make sure you hit stat sig and all of that. There's also your little scrappier ways to do things where you can take the results directionally. I'm not saying change your life based on those results, but at least you start to understand kind of what's happening and you're understanding it a little bit better than maybe you did before.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the goal, is to just get to the clearest possible picture. And it's all point in time, right? Like it's all gonna change as you change parts of your marketing mix or as the market kind of changes around you. That actually, I'm sure you have, but have you ever encountered like a data paradox where having more data led to more confusion versus more clarity? And how did you navigate unraveling from it?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of situations where it's like ultimately you just can't explain what's happening, which is like my worst nightmare, honestly, where no matter what you're looking at, it just doesn't make sense. Where maybe your conversions on a given day are going down, but it doesn't look like any of your attributed channels, like none of the traffic's going down, your spend didn't change for whatever reason, organic's going down. You look into your rankings, it looks like they didn't change at all. So then you're like, well, maybe a competitor spent something, but I don't know for sure. So there've definitely been things like that where I can't necessarily explain it. I think there's definitely a case with Flywheel. When I worked there, when they were around, we launched an at-home bike. At the same time, obviously the Peloton existed and they had much, much larger budgets than us. And like basically what I just explained happened. Our sales fell off a cliff and we looked because they were bidding on our terms like insane amounts beyond what we could ever afford. So there was nothing that we could do about it, which is tough because you can't. I'm not going to sit there and say like, yeah, we need to spend, $5,000 a click on a bike that costs $1,500 that ultimately makes us a $500 profit. Like that just doesn't make sense, even if we're trying to, launch and grow in that environment. So definitely, I feel like competitor situations are always hard because you'll never know exactly what they're doing. You might have some directional information from like a Kantar or a Pathmatics, but none of that's ever 100% accurate. So, and that's also just what they're spending directly. That doesn't include influencers. That doesn't include like a sponsorship or something like that. So, trying to use the tools you have, but ultimately, I think a lot are going to be directional to understand things like that.
Yeah. And it's not always variables that are changing that are within your power to change, which is a really good point. Because I think sometimes we feel, I don't want to say like ivory towerish, but there is an element where it's like, well, why did this happen? It's like, what did we do? And it's like, no, sometimes it's just observing what happened to you or to your brand or to whatever is going on in the marketplace. Like to your point, maybe a competitor launched a new product and, it kind of changes the landscape. But just to like wrap us up here, I could literally talk to you about this all day. I have a few more questions that I'm like, oh, I want to know what she thinks. On the flip side, we've talked a little bit more about doing some of the experiments that are valuable and should be prioritized when you have limited resources. But let's just say you had unlimited resources, an unlimited amount of team at your disposal, an unlimited amount of all of the things. What kind of marketing experiment would you love to conduct? Like dream bucket list market experiment, and what would you want to learn from it?
Yeah, so I think there's two. One is first, like some massive brand experiment where you are holding out basically half the country for a long period of time to try and tease out the actual impact of brand over time. Because like with running any type of experiment, generally they're pretty expensive. And then when you think about brand marketing, it's generally pretty expensive. So to run an experiment where you try to tease those components out, like that would be a dream. And I think there's all sorts of tools that are measuring, brand lift and all sorts of things based on surveys. But to see the brand lift over a long period of time, like that would be so cool to see. And maybe the brand lift isn't as great as we think it is, and people only respond to like DR type marketing. Or maybe it's bigger than we think, and we should actually be spending more on marketing because our 6 months to a year LTVs are much higher for these people exposed to marketing. So that would be a really cool experiment. Another one I've thought about is the idea of message testing through like email and push notifications to try and identify somebody's personality type. A little weird, but because some people respond like really well to like, you won't believe this, and you click on it and you're like, yes, I will. Or, on the flip side of that, it's like, this is perfect for you. And you're like, oh, is it? Like there's certain things that I think you could say with messaging that if you were able to identify that for each person and then customize every communication you send to them in the future based on what you think they're going to respond to, I think that would be really interesting.
That's like the kind of one-to-one personalized marketing that I think everybody would like to do if they're given the choice in like the non-creepiest way possible. Like I'll never forget getting engaged and then Facebook all of a sudden starting to show me weight loss ads. And I was the most pissed off person you've ever seen. I was literally like, like ad feedback. Don't mind if I do. Like there's a kind of, there's like a way to do personalized marketing where you're like, don't do it that way. And then there's a way to do personalized marketing that feels like we all want to be understood. I think that's a basic human desire. And I love the idea. Oh man, now I'm hoping somebody listens to this and is like, I want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like the dream too, in terms of marketing attribution, would to actually understand what's driving someone to purchase, right? Because right now we're relying on testing or clicks or whatever. And like, think about the last purchase you made. Like I bought Solomon boots because I'm going on a hiking trip in a month. Why did I buy those boots? I bought them because my boyfriend has a pair that he really likes. So that's, I guess, would be word of mouth. But then also I like went through a bunch of like hiking boot review websites, read a bunch of reviews, didn't click on any of them. So they don't have any of that affiliate information. But ultimately, where am I actually going to be attributed in their marketing funnel? Just organic, when realistically, it's like all these efforts that they're doing actually had a huge impact, but they won't be able to see that on their side anywhere.
Yeah, that is so true. It's like uncovering purchase intent and like action intent, right? Because like some of the brands that we work with and that you've worked with over your career, it's like you're actually not trying to engender an immediate purchase. Maybe it's like a long consideration cycle or something. And there's just so many uncredited or undercredited touch points of like, first of all, do you know how much time I spend on TikTok? Like I am disgusted to admit it. And I never click on any of the ads. I mean, well, I wouldn't say never, but like I never really click on any of the ads. But like, if you think that I didn't get wind of the new Birkenstock collaboration on TikTok and then like went there, found it, did I order it? 100%. You know what I'm going to show up as? Freaking direct traffic. Direct freaking traffic. And it's the direct traffic is both the balm and the bane of my existence as a marketer. I'm like, it went up, we're doing things good, but then you're also just like, why did it go up again? And I don't know where it's coming from.
Right. Exactly. And I heard an idea actually for using AI to try and explain some of the unexplainable things in the future, right? Because somebody brought up the fact that like as an analyst, you might spend a lot of your time like digging through the data to try and answer a question of why. But maybe there's a future where through the use of Gen AI, you can ask like, why are sales up in X market or whatever it is? And maybe we'll be able to build the tools that say, well, actually, TikTok mentions went up 4,000% a week ago. And that was mostly with videos shown by like younger women. So, and our sales went up with younger women. So we think there might be something there. Like imagine having a tool that can do that for you versus, someone running through the data for, days.
That is one of the most practical applications of AI that I've like heard of / would be excited by. It's like, because it would take so long for any one human or team of human beings to try and uncover that. I actually don't think it's possible. But if you've got that AI brain in there, that is so interesting. The best use of ChatGPT I've seen is somebody on our team uses it to make fun scripts like just like random one act plays based on whatever is going on that week, and they're completely unhinged. But besides that, I think this might be my new favorite possible use cases for marketing and analytics driven AI that I've heard. Because there's never, I don't know if we're going to get to a place like somebody the other day was like, do we think AI is going to really meaningfully impact video production in the next 6 months? And my kind of glib response was like, well, when it can make a picture in which people have 10 fingers and 10 toes, then yes, I think that like it will have an impact on marketing, production, content production, all of that. But like, are there any other things with like the advent of like newer technologies like AI, but also just like newer things that you're like, it's easy to look at the stuff that's happening right now around data deprecation and be like, oh God, and like kind of like, oh, are there things like Gen AI and things that are getting you more excited about the future of analytics and attribution than worried? Like, what's the light at the end of the tunnel for people that are worried about like, where am I going to get my insights from if I don't have access to XYZ?
Yeah, I mean, I think in regards to AI, the one thing that keeps me more excited than scared was something that I heard that was the people who use AI are going to win against the people who don't. Not that AI is going to take over everything, but if you think about that in an analytics standpoint, the analyst who uses AI is going to beat the analyst who doesn't. I think I use it sometimes for things like emails that for my like more like mathematically minded brain take me a while to write. But I say, like, here are the few data points. Can you write an email? And then I'll edit it. And that process takes me 5 minutes versus maybe 20. So things like that definitely get me excited because I don't want to spend my time writing emails. But also I think about some of these tools, specifically let's talk about like data clean rooms, and I'll talk about Google's ADH. You're actually ultimately going to be getting more data, hopefully, in terms of your Google performance, and you'll have a better understanding of that performance. But you're not going to have it on an individual basis. I won't know that Krystina saw a display ad, clicked on it, came to my site, and made a purchase. I'll know that one person saw the ad. Maybe you saw the ad 5 times before you clicked, and you came to the site and made a purchase. And now I have more insights about you. I don't necessarily know that it's you, but ultimately having those insights can help us spend our money better. So that's what I'm excited about, because I think like at least like the big advertising platforms realize that they can give us more data if it's privacy protected, and that keeps the advertisers happy, which ultimately is good for them because then they spend more money. So, I think there's like a lot of exciting stuff happening that I think as a marketing analyst, you have to stay on top of in this day and age. But I think, like we talked about earlier, this environment has always been changing, and we've always had to kind of learn a new tool or think about a new methodology and all of these things. And this is just like another kind of iteration of that process.
I am not in the least bit surprised that my head is nodding as hard as it can and is almost going to fall off. But like, yes, a million times. Yes. Yeah. The only constant is change. That's been true of our marketing analytics wasn't a discipline 30 years ago because we didn't think of it in that way. And we didn't have that as a discipline. So of course it's a newer discipline. Like if I could say discipline 18 times, but like it's a newer discipline and it's going to be evolving because we're still learning. We don't know. But if we're asking the right questions, there's no like shortcut. That AI is not going to be a shortcut for any of the work that you or your teams do or, and actually, okay, so I'll end here. I love asking everybody this question. We hear the term growth hack all the time. And what I want to know is, what is your favorite growth non-hack? I mean, right? Things that don't work. No, I mean, like, when people are just like, well, if you just do this one thing, you'll 3x your ROI. Or if you just do this one blah, blah, blah. Like my favorite was when people were like, oh yeah, I'm like a Facebook growth hacker. And you're like, nah, bro, like you got onto Facebook Ads Manager when it was a baby platform, when you could bid real low and you could make lots of money selling things to people. You just happen to be an early adopter of technology. That's not like a growth hacker. So since you just kind of pulled the thread of like constant iteration, constant learning, it's kind of the antithesis of like the growth hacker mindset. So I'm just curious, like there's no, assuming there's no shortcut, or if you would have told us already, Chelsea, but assuming there's no one shortcut, like what's your favorite growth trick that's not really, maybe not a trick at all, or maybe it is?
I mean, it sounds so simple, but like LTV to CAC, like figure out where's the highest, like where you're actually getting your returns versus what's cheapest. I think, to your point about, growth hackers circa, 5 to 10 years ago, where the CACs were like a cent, and it's like, yeah, of course your ROI was crazy. I think there's still a lot of focus on where can we advertise, like that's the most efficient place that we can advertise, and let's put all of our dollars there. And then if you take a step back and you actually look at your like average order value, or the LTV of those users at 6 months, you'll say like, wait a second, like Instagram's much more expensive, but we're getting people from there that we're able to retarget. And yes, it's more expensive to do that, but their spend curves, or the way that it looks like they spend over time, is much higher than a display ad where our frequency is crazy high, and maybe it's not doing the things to the brand that we think it's doing. So I feel like fairly simple answer, but I think like we talked about earlier, sometimes brands aren't doing the simplest things to grow, which sometimes you have to like take a step back and look at it all and say like, okay, this makes sense, let's put more money there. So yeah.
Well, no, that's a perfect place to end. And I just want to thank you. Like I could talk to you for another hour or two about all of this, because I now have even more questions. And yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm always happy to share. And I think the world of marketing analytics is one of the most interesting, and especially as it's changing and as it's growing. So always excited to continue the conversation.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Growth Talks. We hope you found our discussion insightful and fun. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more valuable content. And if you're excited and ready to start up-leveling your growth strategies and execution, Right Side Up has you covered. Right Side Up is a leading growth marketing agency that has partnered with over 1,000 companies of all stages and sizes to help them meet and exceed their growth goals. With expertise across all growth marketing functions, we can help you evaluate product market fit, develop customer acquisition strategies, navigate executional challenges and staffing gaps, and make pivotal decisions with confidence. And whether you need one individual or a custom-built, full-service team, we'll find you the right A+ talent. Visit us at rightsideup.com to see how we can help you and your company grow.